I am Debbie McKeever, founder and owner of Strong and Healthy Temple. Welcome to my YouTube channel. It is a lovely day out today. Wanted to continue on in my series on mastering your mind in the wilderness season. This is part 10. This is a part that was not a part of my original lineup, but I do like to do things intuitively and by divine inspiration. So I of course added this in. And in this part, I will be talking about Daniel and his Hebrew counterparts, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And you may know them as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And I will first be talking about the four of them collectively, and then I'll break up their experiences into the three Hebrew boys and then Daniel's experience. So with that being said, I will jump right in. At the beginning of their story, the four Hebrew boys, along with all of Jerusalem, they had just been taken into captivity into Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar was king of Babylon at this time, and he wanted some of the men from Jerusalem who were very good looking in appearance and also very wise. He was adding them to his staff along with his other, sorcerers and astrologers and magicians, to be counselors. And so he had dedicated to them, he had appointed for them to have, all of the king's, rich, delicate foods and the wine and things like that. And so Daniel and his friends decided that they did not want to defile themselves with the king's portion. They just wanted to have vegetables and water to keep their bodies pure and their minds clear. And so I want to pause right there and relate that back to us, is that's what we have to do when we're going through our experience. And I'm not just talking about the physical, even though that's important as well. It's important to stay hydrated, so that you can stay, your mind will stay focused and clear, and to eat good foods and not eat a bunch of junk, because that actually does make your brain foggy. But I do want to point out that in the Bible that it even talks about how it's not what goes into your body that defiles you as much as what comes out of it. You can at least release what goes into your body, but what comes out of your mouth will shape and define your reality. So you really have to be careful with your words. But as I was saying, it's more important to go on a spiritual diet. So the way that they wanted to separate themselves, from the physical junk, the king's donuts and whatever else he was serving up, all of his rich and delicate junk. You want to separate yourself from the junky things of the world, from the toxic people, from the drama, from the gossip, from consuming all of the poor and toxic content, either through social media, television, other people's mouths, stay off the phone so much, that kind of thing. So you want to keep your spiritual diet pure and keep your mind pure. And so that's what they did. And they had talked to the chief of the officials about just having the vegetables and water. And of course, at first he was afraid, because he knew that the king was adamant about keeping them looking good, and he thought, well, if you guys just eat vegetables and drink water, you're going to be not going to be looking very well. He thought that they were going to be looking all peaky and scrawny, and the king wanted everybody to be looking good, and he wanted their minds to be sharp, so he wanted to feed them well. And so anyway, he agreed to it, and they did it. They did this for 10 days, and lo and behold, their appearance was better than the appearance of all the other men, and also they were like 10 times wiser than all the other men. And so that's what will happen to us when we separate ourselves from junk and from foolishness, and either go into the silence or just, make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with the right thing and the right people and consuming the right things, then not only is our mind going to be sharper and clearer, but believe it or not, you're actually going to look better in appearance. When you're not dealing with foolishness, you look better. You ever seen somebody that they were just worrying so much? It's kind of like the president of the United States. When they go in, they look younger, and then, by the time they come out of office, they look older, and they've got the gray and the stuff going on. It's all the worry and the stress. And so we've got to get rid of that and separate ourselves from that. So moving along, and this is all, in the beginning of Daniel. By the time we get to the second chapter, we see that King Nebuchadnezzar has this dream. And so he's consulting with all the magicians and the astrologers and the wise men of Babylon, all the Chaldeans, trying to get them to tell him what this dream was and also get the interpretation of it, because this dream was troubling him. And he didn't do like Pharaoh did in Joseph's day. He didn't tell his wise men and stuff what the dream actually was. He wanted them to tell him the dream and give the interpretation. And they were like, is he crazy? Like, nobody can do that. Nobody can tell you what you dreamed and give you the interpretation. You have to at least tell us what the dream was, and then we can interpret it for you. But he knew that they were just trying to trick him, and they were just going to make something up. So he didn't fall for it. He was like, no, you got to tell me the dream and you got to tell me its interpretation. So he became so ticked off that nobody could do that for him, that none of these wise men could do that he decided, I'm just gonna slay all of the wise men in the land. And of course, this included Daniel and his 3 friends, even though they had never even gone before the king. All of the other people that had gone before the king, they couldn't tell him the dream or the interpretation. So he was just going to kill everybody. And so Daniel got word of it, and he went home and he told his friends what had happened. And he pleaded with them, we need to go before God so that, God can give us the answer to what this dream was and give us the interpretation. And that's what we have to do. We have to be like Daniel when things are going on that we don't have any knowledge of or that we don't understand. What we have to do is that we can't start trying to use trickery and, trying to come up with it in our own minds. We have to go before God. We have to get still and we have to get silent, get into a meditative mode so that we can be given the vision and the interpretation. Given the vision and given what to do with it, given the divine ideas, and then the instructions on what to do with those divine ideas. So sure enough, God came to Daniel in a dream, because Daniel had a gift for interpreting dreams the same way that Joseph did. And so God came to Daniel in a dream, and he gave him Nebuchadnezzar's dream and gave him the interpretation of it. And so they all went before the king and, was able to interpret the dream. So the king was so excited, he's excited for Daniel. But of course, Daniel gave glory to, to God. And that's what we have to do. We give glory, of course, to the Most High when these things happen. We don't become arrogant and, give all credit to ourselves like we're all knowing. It's the God within us that are doing these things. And so anyway, the king ended up promoting Daniel. Same thing happened for him that happened for Joseph, where he got promoted to a high position. And that's what will happen with us, is that God will give us these divine ideas that, when we go before these great men, will get us exalted. We'll get exalted just like Daniel. And then of course Daniel pleaded with the king, and he also exalted Daniel's friends. So they all 4 ended up getting exalted. And so not only will you be exalted, but people that are associated with you will also be exalted. It's like there's this strong anointing on you where everybody in your presence starts to come up, and it gets to the point that everybody wants to be around you because they can see your light. And so with that being said, I'm going to move on to the separate experiences here of the Hebrew boys and Daniel. So I'll start with the Hebrew boys. In chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar decides to build this golden statue to himself. And so he wants everybody to worship this golden statue. It's kind of like the golden calf that I talked about in part 1. And so at the sound of the flute and the harp and all these, and the cornet, everybody was to fall down and to worship and to bow down before this great big statue of Nebuchadnezzar. So of course the 3 Hebrew boys refuse to bow down before anybody other than the Most High. And that's how we have to be in our lives. We don't look outside of ourselves and bow down to things outside of ourselves. We only bow down to God, to the God within. Whatever the higher power is that you believe in, that's what you bow down to. And don't look outside of that into the world. You'll get these people that'll exalt themselves in all these different positions of influencers, or these celebrities that people worship, all these different things that people are bowing down to, and they're not really looking within and bowing down to a higher power. And so they refuse to bow down. And so then along comes these haters, like these haters in our lives do. They started immediately making accusations. They went running and telling the king, everybody's bowing down except for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's how our adversaries do. That's how our haters do. They start hurling accusations because now they want to get us in trouble, because they don't like the fact that we're not bowing down, to foolishness. And so the king, of course, was very ticked off, and he called for them, and, he questioned them about it. And they told him, we're not bowing down. And so he was pissed, and he let them know, okay, if you don't bow down, you're going to get thrown into the burning fiery furnace. And so they said, we don't care, because if you throw us in, our God is going to deliver us. And even if he doesn't, we're still not bowing down. And that's how we have to be. We have to stand steadfast in our faith and refuse to bow down to anything else other than what we're believing in. And the burning fiery furnace is a representative of, that thing that we all hate to go through, and that is the refiner's fire. And when we're going through things, we don't want to go through the fire. We want to pass around, and we just automatically, want to be purified. But in order for gold to be purified, it has to go through the refiner's fire. There is no shortcut. And so we have to get our minds prepared to go through the refiner's fire, knowing that God is passing us through to deliver us as pure as gold. And that's where the Hebrew boys' mindset was. They knew that God was going to deliver them. And they even said, even if he don't, we ain't bowing down. But they knew that he would. And so that's where we're at. And so King Nebuchadnezzar, he was so ticked off that he had them to turn up the heat on the furnace. It was 7 times hotter than it normally was. And so it was so hot that the men that threw them in actually got consumed by the fire. And that's what will happen in our lives when we stand steadfast and we're not afraid to go through the refiner's fire. Those same people that accused us, that are ready to throw us in, not knowing that the fire is going to refine us, they think it's going to destroy us. And so they end up getting consumed by the fire that they were trying to throw you in. And so that's what happened to them. The first thing they did was they bound them up. And so them being bound represents the bondage of our own minds, being afraid to go through the refiner's fire. Even though in the story, the Hebrew boys aren't afraid, but them being bound up, that's a representation of a mindset that is in bondage to wanting to pass through the fire. So once they got thrown into the fire and, these men got consumed, King Nebuchadnezzar noticed something. he noticed, he looked and he said, did we not throw 3 men down, bound into the fire? And they were like, yeah, king. And so he's like, but I see 4 men loose and they're walking around unharmed, and the 4th one looks like the Son of God. And so what the Son of God represents is our I amness. When we surrender to our oneness with I am, with the source of all creation, we will go through the fire unharmed. He said that they were walking around unharmed. So we'll be walking around in the fire, and no harm will come to us because we've surrendered to our I amness. We've surrendered to God, and we've surrendered to the fact that we want to be purified. We're okay with going through the refiner's fire. So anyway, he calls them out of the fire, and the Bible is specific to say that not a hair on their head was singed, and they didn't even smell like smoke. What that signifies is, once you are restored, you won't even look like what you went through. Unless somebody knows you personally, once you come out of that refiner's fire, the evidence of what you went through is completely destroyed. You don't look like what you've been through. You look like you were always where you're at. And I talked about this in another part, where we see people in their glory and we don't know what their experience was, and we're kind of looking like, oh wow, look at so-and-so. We didn't see so-and-so when they were in their wilderness experience. We didn't see so-and-so when they were going through the refiner's fire. But that's what will happen. God will make us like gold, and so we don't even look like what we've been through. And so, once they came out of the fire, of course, Nebuchadnezzar gave glory to who was their God. And so again, don't be afraid to go through the refiner's fire, knowing that God will deliver you, and that you will be pure as gold, and you won't look at all like what you've been through. There will be no evidence, of those circumstances prior to the fire. And so with that being said, I'll skip to chapter 6, which was Daniel's experience. And by this time, Darius the Mede was king, and Daniel once again had been exalted to a high position. So here we are again. We're being exalted, and of course, exaltation attracts haters. And so he's got haters again, and these haters are coming up with a scheme. They're plotting, and so they get King Darius to write up this decree saying that anybody that is worshiping any other god other than you yourself, king, they're going to get thrown into a lion's den. So he wrote it up. They got him to write it up because they knew that once he wrote it up, it couldn't be undone. They knew the decree couldn't be undone. And it's like it is with our words. That's why we have to be careful what we decree, because once we decree it, that's what's going to be done. The good news is that we can change it, and that's why you have to be intentional about manifesting, because you can go and you can correct what you've put out there, go and put something new out there into the atmosphere. But anyway, so Daniel, he wasn't afraid about this decree. He went home that day, and he did what he always does. He prayed and he bowed down to the Most High, to God, to I Am. And not only did he do that, but he didn't even try to hide. He opened up the window for all to hear and see. And that's how we have to be. Like, we can't be ashamed of our faith. And a lot of times we get ashamed because we don't want people to think that we're strange or we're woo or whatever it is. But Daniel wasn't ashamed. He wasn't ashamed to worship God. So here comes the haters. They went running, telling the king what Daniel had done. And so the king really highly favored Daniel. And so they let the king know what he had done, and that, of course, he had to be thrown into the lion's den. And the king didn't want to do it, but they reminded him, it's in your decree, so you can't undo it, got to throw him down there. And so The king had to throw him down, but before he put him down there, even the king said, your God, whom you worship, he's able to deliver you. Because he knew that Daniel was faithful. But anyway, the king couldn't even sleep that night, because he hated what he had allowed those haters to trick him into. And so the next morning, he goes down there and he says, Daniel, did your God whom you worship, did he deliver you? And Daniel said, "Oh, king, live forever. God sent an angel and closed the lion's mouth." Why did God do this? The reason why God did this is because Daniel was not focused on the power of the lions, but rather he was focused on the power of his God. And so that's how we have to be. We can't be focused on the power of our problems. We have to be focused on the power of our God, the power of our affirmations, the power of our faith, the power of our I amness, our oneness with the source of all creation. Whatever it is that you believe in, you have to know that that is bigger than what you perceive your problem to be, and the lion's mouth will be shut. Because God is bigger than your problem, you won't get devoured, even in the lion's den. And so, he summoned Daniel to come forth, and he was so ticked off with the people that had tricked them. He took them and all of their family members and had them thrown into the lion's den, and the lions were eating them up and consuming them before they could even hit the bottom. And that's what will happen to your adversaries who are trying to destroy you if you stay faithful. They'll get thrown into the lion's den, but they won't be delivered. They'll be consumed. And so, we have to be like Daniel and keep our eyes on God and keep it's like I talked about, I think it was in part 6, is when it's your dominant thoughts that'll come to pass. So if you're spending most of the time thinking about the problem, it's the problem that's going to manifest into your physical reality. But if you spend your time thinking about the deliverance and the restoration, it's the deliverance and the restoration that will manifest itself into your reality. So anyway, that is a wrap. I hope you've been enjoying this. I've got one more part to go. Hopefully this series has been a blessing and has brought value to you. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment, subscribe to the videos, hit the bell icon to receive notifications. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for sticking with me in this series. Make it a fantastic day and week.